Welcome to this next episode of YouTube where we've labeled it conditioning, both fireworks and flies. As obviously the 4th of July fireworks created a lot of noise here, and we traditionally will take the pups out during the fireworks, and I'm showing a little video here. We can see a little bit through the trees from the center location, and so it's definitely close enough that we get a lot of noise, and it's important for us to condition the wolves to those kind of sounds. They're already actually very tolerant of thunderstorms, so they have no problem with thunderstorms, but fireworks are a whole different matter. A lot more noise and a lot more kind of explosive noise. And so what we did was we brought Boltz out into the runway with Oscar, let them do their typical male canid wrestling. And so you can see Oscar and Boltz kind of engaged in jaw sparring and a little bit of scruff grabbing and that kind of thing. And what that did was created a very relaxed atmosphere for Boltz. And as we continued with the fireworks and the noise kind of continued, he had no issues with it whatsoever. And Luna stayed in the yard because, again, they still have restrictions. She's not authorized to be with him just yet until we get that next x-ray and see that we are making progress with her. But Luna basically kind of sat and listened a little bit. Not any tuck-tail response, not any fear response. Was a little bit interested, but got preoccupied with Oscar and Boltz wrestling in the runway and really took the focus off the fireworks and, just pretty much made it a non-event. And that's real important. If we didn't do that kind of conditioning, fireworks happen every year, and we don't want the wolves to have any fear avoidance behavior, those kind of sounds. So early conditioning to those sounds and making a positive experience, and certainly positive for Boltz because he got to wrestle with Oscar, which is one of those things he likes to do, and positive for Luna to the point where she wants to socially engage. She puts a paw up to the fence and she tries to interact, and that is took the focus off the noise and really was a pretty successful night. The mosquitoes were out, but the wind was actually fairly strong as well, but definitely they did pretty well. You want to bite them. You don't care about the noise, you just want to bite.
Yeah, she wants to.
Yeah. That's good.
It's good.
We've also got some other video of Luna just to show you, again, the personality of this pup. A lot of people feel like, a pup with a broken leg would be, moping around and not feeling very well, and quite the contrary. Luna is very active, and this is their back right leg. You can see that's the leg that's injured. You can see her do a little hop on it. The challenge is, again, we try to make her be as inactive as possible, but that's not always the case. She has got a lot of energy, and she wants to, work up that energy or work off that energy, and so we keep her in the kennel all night long, where she's in a 4x5 kind of protected, but we got to give her some freedom to be able to express herself psychologically. She needs to have that opportunity to engage, and she gets frustrated, and when she's frustrated she actually is at more risk of injuring herself because she's pacing or climbing or whatever. So we do give her time to play with toys, and like I said, we give her alternating time with a bigger yard versus the runway. So the runway is all gravel, it's fairly level except for one pad in the front, and she does get that opportunity to actually even exercise that leg, and we've seen a significant increase in muscle mass since the last x-ray, where we've given her a little bit more freedom, and that's been good. But you can see here she is a very predatory kind of puppy. She likes to head shake a lot. She likes to attack things. She's got some very strong dominant predatory skills, and one of the problems that we see is she uses some of that predatory behavior on Boltz. As I said, the only time they're together is when we do public programs 4 times a day in a very small kennel in the auditorium. And when they're together, she is the aggressor. She goes after Boltz. She grabs him by the head. She head shakes him. She tries to pin him. And these are all factors that are influencing the decisions, again, to let her have time with Boltz. We need her to get over some of that frustration so that when her and Boltz interact, it's normal interaction, not this aggressive head-shaking, attacking behavior. So I'll let you listen. We also got some footage of her howling. This was taken with someone's cell phone. In the exhibit pack, Aiden and Denali are still maintaining very calm social interactions. We have started to see a little guarding behavior from Aiden, and that's not necessarily a problem. We are watching for changes hormonally between these two individuals. Right now we know that they're fairly high in, or we assume that they're fairly high stimulated in prolactin because of the whining, salivating, regurgitating social behavior that they have towards the pups. But we also know that prolactin does wane usually in coming into August, and so that's when testosterone may pick up. And so we're watching these two carefully to see if we're starting to see a little more active dominance versus kind of the passive dominance that you're watching here. Passive dominance meaning Aiden's doing a standover Denali. Of course, Denali's grooming himself, not really paying attention to the standover, but that a little overt show of status is normal for a dominant wolf like Aiden. And again, with these two being a pair, there really isn't a rank order that's necessarily maintained, but we do see Aiden having more frequency of these kind of standovers. Now, it doesn't mean that Denali's not going to have a standover, and you'll actually see one here in the next clip. But what we want to make sure is if we start to see tendencies of this prolactin kind of wearing off and testosterone kind of increasing, we want to make sure that we time this pup introduction so that it works well for the behavior of the adults and the kind of the interactions of the adults. So as you can see here, Aiden just submits to Denali. That's not a sign of weakness. That's a social greeting. Denali's grooming him. Clearly, these two are under the influence of something very social, and that's the behavior that we want to target when we introduce Boltz. And one of the things that will maybe be an influence is weather. Certainly because it's hot, they're a lot calmer. It's been in the 90s, which is unbelievably hot for northern Minnesota, unbelievably hot for wolves, and so we've been seeing a lot of down behavior from those individuals. If we happen to get a cold front comes through and we have highs in the 60s, we might see a little bit more activity. But right now, this passive submission, rolling over on his back, Aiden's using his front paws to reach, do a foreleg stab, reach over to Denali, grab him, kind of interact. Denali's doing a very inhibited bite, pin to the ground, meaning he's inhibited, meaning he's not biting hard. He's just pinning Aiden to the ground, and then going into a grooming behavior is very, very positive. So if the introduction were today, I'd say everything's going to be smooth. I have 24 days left, and again, I want to watch what these changes are and how these changes might influence the introduction. Not that we're changing the introduction. We have a behavioral team that's set for July 30th. Unless something changes dramatically, that is the target date, because we have a team of people who are able and willing to participate in a program to observe them for 24 hours. And that's something that we need, and we can't really veer from that. So we're going to stick with that July 30th date, but just watchful of this kind of behavior. The other things that we're dealing with is flies. If you've been in northern Minnesota, flies are out. So we're doing a lot of conditioning about flies. And, it goes between the different enclosures. Fly conditions are different. Here, Grizzer's got a lot of shade. He doesn't nearly have the biting flies that everyone else does. These particular flies that bite the tips of their ears are typically sun lovers, meaning they're out in the full sunshine. If you have deep shade, you have mosquitoes, but you don't necessarily have biting flies. Mosquitoes don't seem to bother the wolves, but these biting flies will go for the tips of their ears. Grizzer is mostly done with shedding, very, very fine undercoat on his neck, and that's it for him. And we will continue, again, to groom that out, but it really is a non-issue, and he's extremely tolerant to grooming. That's something that he seems to really enjoy, based on our interpretation of him standing next for it and standing next to us and allowing us to do it. But second of all, sometimes when you get into brushing him, he drops to the ground and rolls on his back, and that's usually a good indication that he's willingly accepting the handling practice. Tips of his ears a little bit full of fly ointment. We still use fly ointment on him because we don't want any bites, but that kind of greasy coloration there is typically associated with the fly ointment. So that's the other thing that we were talking about as far as conditioning, the fly ointment issue. In retirement, Shadow and Malik, as young pups, did not have kind of the intensive conditioning that we are doing with every other, or have done with every other litter, meaning that Right now, the 2012 pups are getting Vaseline on their ears. They're getting spray bottles of mist of water misted over them on a regular basis, so they're used to having something sticky on their ears. They're used to having a mist over their body. Shadow and Malik didn't have that, so that means they're very fear-avoiding of our fly ointment procedures. So what we've been doing is adapting a little bit. We put it on a birch snag. We've got a dead birch that's maybe about 8 feet tall. Put it at the base and let them scent roll on that fly spray, and that allows them to get covered with that spray. And the second thing that we've been doing is we've been spraying the den with cedar oil. And again, that's just a natural oil, but what it does, it seems to have some natural bug repellent capabilities. And what that allows for is both wolves to be in the den, and you really don't see the cloud of flies in the den because of the cedar oil. So this, what they're rubbing on, is actually a fly repellent that's made for pets, and that's a spray. The second thing that we do is, like I said, is the cedar in the den to give that kind of repellent to the flies and to keep them out of the den. The other thing I want to comment a little bit about, a lot of people question our feeding. We do feed once a week, but that does not mean that caches don't come out of the woods a little bit later. And here's Malik feeding on a deer leg, which we had fed over a week ago. And in hot weather, you can really see how the wolf's constitution and abilities to digest things, even things a little smelly, are part of that natural diet. And we'll end here with Shadow. And Shadow is back in the woods, and he is trying to avoid some of those biting flies. And so again, this was a clip actually prior to us doing the cedar in the den. He was going to the shade and trying to get rid of those flies and trying to avoid them. You can see how irritating it is, and this is really why we want to control flies. Bites on the ears can heal. You know, there are some that are pretty extreme, but for the most part they can heal. It's the restlessness that happens for these older animals. They're not getting the rest they need because they're irritated by the bugs. That's what we need to control and be able to, again, make that a more comfortable environment for them. So that's it. We'll keep you posted on the next YouTube about Luna's results of her next x-rays. Thanks for watching.